Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. Few things are as polarizing, as controversial, or as motivating to America and its voters than abortion. But tonight there is rare, almost unprecedented agreement from both sides. Both pro-lifers and pro-choicers will tell you, tomorrow is quite literally for all of the marbles. A Supreme Court, now weighted 6-3 with Republican-appointed justices, will begin hearing a case that directly challenges legalized abortion in America. It centers around a Mississippi law which forbids abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And while it doesn't actually outlaw abortion, for the Supreme Court to uphold it, the justices would effectively have to overturn the law of the land, Roe v. Wade, and its subsequent cases, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, for example, which say states cannot impose undue burden on pre-viability abortion. That's abortion before the fetus could live outside its mother's body, generally to be considered 22 to 24 weeks. Again, it's impossible to understate the significance of tomorrow's argument and the subsequent ruling by the court. It will have major effects on women, on health care, and on politics in America. To start, if Roe is overturned, then abortion becomes immediately illegal in at least 12 states due to so-called trigger laws that go into effect. If nothing else, this map shows you the idea that there are already trigger laws waiting for this case gives you an idea of the planning, the time, the money put in by the conservative legal movement for tomorrow. Overturning Roe in and of itself is not a popular thing. The latest GALLUP polling shows 58% of Americans oppose overturning Roe, just 32% are in favor. Those are big numbers, and abortion is highly motivating to the political bases of both parties, which brings us back to the Supreme Court. As we said, it's 6-3 right now. Tim Alberta wrote in his great book, American Carnage, President Trump won because the conservative movement and its voters were motivated by his commitment to appoint pro-life judges. President Trump appointed 3 justices, and abortion rights stood center stage during their confirmation hearings.
It's distressing not to get a straight answer. So let me try again. Do you agree with Justice Scalia's view that Roe was wrongly decided?
I can't pre-commit or say, yes, I'm going in with some agenda, because I'm not.
One of the important things to keep in mind about Roe v. Wade is that it has been reaffirmed many times.
Call it strategic ambiguity. But to be clear, this is the first time the justices voted to hear a case that would allow states to possibly ban abortion. In the past, they've simply denied them out of hand. Look at it 2 ways. One, they want to put it to bed once and for all. Hear a challenge to Roe, uphold it, and move on. Second option, they might actually overturn Roe. Either would be an earthquake. Overturning Roe would outlaw abortions, as we said, in at least 12 states, with more to come, certainly create a black market for abortions in those states and energize the Democrats in a way perhaps never seen before. Upholding Roe would be a devastating blow to the conservative legal movement. It would prove useless. Decades of fundraising and work by conservative politicians. It would also perhaps change election dynamics in the Republican Party. As we said, the stakes simply could not be any higher. Tomorrow is the day religious right and conservative legal movement and their voters and their lawyers have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and a few decades planning for. Tomorrow is also the day Democrats have feared and warned would come. Elena Treen of Axios will tell us about the political implications, but we start with Mae Davis, a woman who designed much of the strategy for tomorrow. She last served in President Trump's White House counsel's office and joins us now. Counselor, we appreciate you being with us. You're the lawyer and the expert. Did we get anything wrong in the intro?
No, that was a great summary. And you're exactly right. The stakes for tomorrow are very high. I mean, there are watch parties run by lawyers in every state.
I can't exactly think a watch party with lawyers would be exciting, but there you go. Is there a middle ground here where the court somehow upholds Roe, but also upholds this Mississippi law?
So a middle ground would be very hard to find. Roe versus Wade and Casey are legally indefensible. And my professors at Harvard Law School, even the most liberal professors, would say, yeah, there is no constitutional trimester system for Casey, viability is not in the Constitution. So the question really is not whether this case would have been decided in this way if these were the first justices to think about it. It really is this case worth overturning now that we have it, now that we've got this system built up? So that's really going to be what the question is. And if the justices really try and find a middle ground where they can uphold the Mississippi law, but not really discuss Roe versus Wade, as you said, this will be devastating to the conservative legal movement, which has really dedicated itself.
Yeah, no, this day is what 20 years of work is come to. I want to touch on what you said, and I never want to argue law with a lawyer because I'm not one, but even Ruth Bader Ginsburg sort of agreed with you at one point and said that Roe is hard to find in the Constitution. So that's an important point. So the court may be looking for something there. If the court was not going to overturn Roe, why take this case at all?
So that's one of the things that's a little interesting about this case is that when this case was presented to the Supreme Court, it was presented on a challenge to the Mississippi law, not as a straightforward, we want to overturn Roe versus Wade. Then when Mississippi actually ended up briefing the case, they squarely presented it and said, we would like to overturn Roe versus Wade. And so what Mississippi will now argue, which is not exactly what they argued when they were asking the court to take this case, is that yes, I think the justices, at least certainly the swing justices, will agree that Roe versus Wade was decided wrongly, but is it time to change the law?
After this, we'll take it two parts. Post-Roe strategy has been something the conservative movement has spent a lot of time and money on. If Roe is overturned and the Mississippi law is upheld, does abortion effectively become illegal in almost all of America?
So it does not. And I think for most Americans, they won't really see a difference. I mean, in all of your major cities in New York and California, there is no way that they're going to enact pro-life policies all of a sudden after decades of not doing it. So yes,
well, but you think about major cities. You think about Florida's a red state right now. Texas is certainly a red state right now with its own challenges as it relates to abortion laws. There's a huge population of America that could no longer have access to abortions, right?
That's certainly the case, I guess. So then you would have some of your red states. And even though these trigger laws are in effect right now, it's going to be until, several months until the Supreme Court actually rules. And then you're going to have an election right on the heels of that. So this is going to be a very political issue. I think these trigger laws, yes, they're in the books, but this is something that's going to be continually talked about and continually reassessed at the state level.
And if all of a sudden the court has decided effectively, and you think about, say, Justice Kavanaugh, who talked in his confirmation hearing about this is the law of the land, Roe's been the law for 45 years and the like, if they decide to uphold Roe and say just that's precedent, and even though we disagree with how it was decided, then we're just going to go forward and Mississippi has to change their rules. Is this the end of the conservative legal movement?
The conservative legal movement is going to have to rethink what its goals are. I mean, if you've spent your entire time trying to get judges on the Supreme Court that will apply the law as written and not as convenient, and then you get this, I think that you're going to see a big change in how do we focus on preserving the rights of the unborn? How do we focus on having a more robust, a more muscular conservative movement that doesn't just crumble when something seems a little bit difficult?
May, fascinating analysis. Enjoy the watch party tomorrow. This isn't over, obviously. We want to have you back to talk about it all. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. One Democratic senator issued this stark warning to the high court just hours before. We are quite literally within 24 hours before the justices will hear the case. On the other side, Mississippi Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith made a point today that she believes abortion laws should be left up to, and this is something that we've heard, the states.
With this case, the Supreme Court can reconsider its misguided abortion laws and return lawmaking to legislators who are ultimately accountable to the voters.
No. However the court decides, it will rewrite party dynamics on both sides. For that, we bring in Elena Treen, Axios congressional report correspondent and political guru du jour. Good to see you, Elena. Thank you. Are the stakes as high as they seem, and how is Capitol Hill and politicians on both sides viewing that?
Well, Leland, the stakes are very high. I mean, depending on what happens in this case, it's very different. I think a lot of people are trying to draw comparisons to the Texas abortion law that we saw last month. This is very different. What's happening with what the Supreme Court is going to see before it tomorrow really has the potential, as you've said, to reshape the abortion landscape. And that's the big thing. And I think the big question that everyone is interested in is, could a newly conservative Supreme Court with 3 justices who were installed alone by President Trump really have feel like they're ready to take on abortion rights and potentially change the landscape that we've seen really be controlled by Roe v. Wade for years now. And so that's why it is
from a
so
political
important.
standpoint, that's been the thing. President Trump even made that point very clear in a debate. Aside sort of the argument over abortion per se, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, as President Trump would predict in 2016, how does that change the political landscape, say, for Republicans who want to retake the Senate?
Well, and just to say, I mean, I understand your question, but I think it is a big if, because I do think even the justices that the former president installed, they do look at Roe v. Wade and precedent as a key thing to their decision making. Sure. So I think the idea of overturning Roe v. Wade is very far off still, and we have to figure out whether they're willing to go that far. But it does change the Republican landscape. I mean, abortion has continued to be one of the key issues that really lights a fire under a lot of Republicans and voters across America on both sides, but particularly among those who are very pro-life. And so a lot of the messaging will come back to that.
Are you seeing members and strategists starting to figure out how they're going to spin this and play this to fundraise starting tomorrow based on the arguments?
Not yet, to be honest. I think that the thing here is a lot of people don't know yet what's going to happen. And also, I mean, it's worth noting, it could be until next summer that we actually know what happens with this case. So at least from my reporting on Capitol Hill and my conversations with Republicans in the House and Senate, there isn't a lot of attention being paid right now to what the ultimate decision would be, because I think most people expect this to take a long time.
Last question for you is it relates to what happens if, and we enjoy playing that game. There was so much discussion during the 2020 election about court packing by Democrats, expanding the Supreme Court if they started getting decisions they didn't like. This was then Senator Joe Biden back in 1983 talking about court packing. Take a listen.
President Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make.
That was when there was a Republican in the White House. Are Democrats continuing to talk about this, or was that something, court packing was to appease the far left and motivate the base during the presidential election?
It's a good question. It's hard to say. I mean, I'll admit, very honestly, this hasn't been something that I'm hearing a lot of on Capitol Hill. And the attention to the Supreme Court right now, just given everything else and the priorities in Congress, isn't a huge, point of messaging or talking point. But I do think, I will say, when this comes, if one justice decides to retire and step down and opens another vacancy, if this becomes an issue, I think without question, under President Biden, the issue of court packing will very much be front and center. It's just not one right now, just given that there isn't a vacancy that, is in near term that they can look at. And so the conversation just isn't focused on that right now.
You make a great point that it's never top of mind and never the issue till it becomes the issue, and then it's the only thing anybody talks about. Elena, always great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Leland.
All right. Politicians fight like children on Twitter, but that's their First Amendment right, or is it? We'll get to that. Plus, CNN finally steps in to address the Chris Cuomo controversy. What's happening to the legend in his own mind? Welcome back. The unending crisis at the southern border is bleeding President Biden of political capital. The right doesn't like his policies of effectively an open border. The left doesn't like that he's cutting off a path to citizenship in the Build Back Better legislation, really abandoning illegal immigrants in the Build Back Better legislation. And the center is still waiting for comprehensive immigration reform, an elusive goal that goes back to my days doing mock presidential debates in high school. And now he's being forced to reinstate the Trump-era Remain in Mexico policy. It was suspended by President Biden, just hours after he took office. But the courts have now ordered the current administration to require those seeking asylum to wait in Mexico till their claims are processed. The migration protocols put in place by President Trump severely curtailed illegal immigration during the previous administration. Illegal immigration has since exploded during this administration. Joining us now, Pablo Manriquez, Capitol correspondent for the Latino Rebels. Pablo, good to see you.
How's it going, Leland?
It's great. It's great. We're glad you're here. It seems as though Biden just cannot catch a break when it comes to immigration. Is there? Let me ask you a different way. Is there anybody who's happy with Joe Biden's immigration policy?
Stephen Miller, the Donald Trump's immigration advisor, is happy with Biden's immigration policy in as much as it relates to the Remain in Mexico, because that's actually Stephen Miller's policy, which is what makes it so unpalatable to the left. Obviously, when it's a progressive, when it's a Democrat, when they just think of Donald Trump, it makes them shudder. But when they think of Stephen Miller, it really makes them shudder. So for them to be having to eat or to enforce or to execute the policies that they campaigned so hard against from the time that they were enacted under the Trump administration until now they're, they have to, given the choice between confronting the courts, confronting the Mexican government, the partners in the region, or, as you say, just sort of like not doing anything, they've decided to keep the Stephen Miller policy. And I've been thinking about this all afternoon, sort of like what is the rationale of their thinking. And there was, I guess, some clues at today's Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing on Latin America. There is like a very strong push to work with Mexico, because some of the other countries in the region have really fallen or failed into sort of narco states.
That's true.
Former president of Honduras' brother just got extradited and sentenced to many years in prison. So Mexico is sort of like the partner that we actually want to work with, and this is a place where we can work with them. There are human rights concerns. There are a lot of things that can go very wrong.
There's huge issues here, but you just look at the numbers. Okay, this is U.S. Mexico has seen a sharp rise. This is from Customs and Border Protection. You can see the red line is where President Biden took over, and the numbers just shot up in a crazy way, now close to 250,000 per month coming across the border. Is there any desire, or is there an understanding among progressives that centrist Democrats are going to face difficulties if the border crisis continues?
I think there is, but it's unspoken. Right now in Congress, in the Democratic caucus in both the House and Senate, there are no vocal Democrats against progressive immigration policies. Like, no one has yet to come out. Now, Stephanie Murphy, Josh Gottheimer, some of the more centrist members of the House of Representatives have been accused by other members and by staffers of being sort of like centrist border hawks when it comes to the immigrant relief provisions that Democrats have been pushing this year. But neither Gottheimer nor Stephanie Murphy, and I've asked them both several times, will say on the record that they oppose these policies. So it's kind of like a rock and a hard place. I think the Democrats know that they need immigrant rights groups. They need this essential organizing infrastructure to win elections, to mobilize in some swing states like Arizona and Nevada, but at the same time, they can't deliver. So it's like they
have
can't.
To probably put Henry Cuellar in that list too of Democrats who feel as though they've got a real border problem, and part of that's just because of where President Biden's coattails are, right? Biden approval on the border, 31% approve, 66% disapprove. Biden overall approval rating, 38% approve. So he's 7 points underwater even on the border. So what I'm hearing from you, though, is that progressives really are able to control centrist Democrats from even talking about securing the border because of the threat of a primary challenge.
Yes, but they're not able to control a centrist president from enacting sort of like the worst of several bad options, right? Like I was saying before, if there is a silver lining to the Remain in Mexico policy, is that it forces a bilateral relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. Now, the consequences of that relationship can be really bad for immigrants. They can be really bad for people on both sides of the border. But it's something that they are doing and that they have to do. Now, there's a lot of immigration advocates will argue that the Biden administration does not have to follow the guidance from the courts, like that they can actually do.
It's interesting. You kind of wonder whether they're following the guidance from the court, hoping that just less people come because they're going to have to remain in Mexico and it solves their other problem. Hey, Pablo, we got to run. We got some breaking news on the other side of the break. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Take it away, Leland.
See you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Republicans and Democrats do agree on something: hatred for big tech. What that means for this guy, Twitter's new CEO. American history is ripe with our elective representatives behaving badly, and we're going to get to some modern-day examples. There are many in just a second, but context here is important. Let's go back to just as the Republic began. Think Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, who finally decided to settle their significant differences, as men do or did at the time, with a duel. Or there's Preston Brooks, a pro-slavery Democrat who beat and nearly killed Senator Charles Sumner for his abolitionist speech on the Senate floor. There's the cane that he beat him with. History records that Brooks and an accomplice waited for the gallery to clear of women before beginning their attack. Evidently, that was the gentlemanly thing to do at the time. Now just think what would happen if they had all had Twitter. Sadly, we don't have to think. We know, and this goes back to our top story, abortion. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the more, shall we say, outspoken members of the Republican caucus, went after fellow Republican Nancy Mace for not being Republican enough. Nancy Mace is the trash in the GOP conference, tweeted Greene, never attacked by Democrats or rhinos. Same thing, because she is not conservative. She's pro-abort. Greene's tweet got worse from there. Her tweet did. We're going to spare you the details of that. Mace responded with this. If you don't understand it, you can have your grandkids explain it to you. This is what a bat emoji, the poop emoji, and a crazy clown emoji looks like. Again, this is the Twitter account of a United States Congresswoman. Leave it to Eric Garcia of the UK Independent to explain. This is getting lost in the conversation, but the reason why Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying Nancy Mace is pro-abort is because Mace was raped in high school and as a result wants exemptions for abortion bans for rape and incest, which many anti-abortion conservatives also support. So to be entirely clear, Greene is going after someone who dropped out of high school because she was raped and went on to go to the Citadel, and on top of that, very few people fall under unconditional pro-choice or pro-life categories. So to be clear, Twitter is perhaps one of the worst things to happen to all of us. It rewards hot takes and punishes nuance. It stokes division while making compromise a dirty word. Again, just imagine if Burr and Hamilton had Twitter. Well, Twitter itself is now the rightful subject of a lot of scrutiny. Its founder, Jack Dorsey, recently stepped down, and the new CEO is ready to take the political conversation on, pointing to his comments at a conference last year where he said that Twitter is, quote, not to be bound by the First Amendment, but our role is to serve a healthy public conversation, the kinds of things that we do about this, focusing less on thinking about free speech, but thinking about how times have changed. With us, founding editor of Mediaite Colby Hall, Axios politics reporter Sarah Muha. Thank you both. All right, Colby. Wow, I guess he said the quiet part out loud. Twitter no longer thinks that everybody's got a right to say what they want.
Well, I mean, I think there's a point that if Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton had Twitter, maybe they would have resolved their differences digitally and Alexander Hamilton would have survived. But, you know, First Amendment doesn't, he's right. First Amendment is about government. It's not about Twitter. And I think he's not saying that he's against First Amendment. What he's saying is that, you know, he's a private company. And when you sign up for Twitter, you sign up, you agree to terms and conditions. And, you know, he talked about healthy discourse. What they've tried to position themselves as is they want to be the plumbing. They want to be the utility and leave the sort of mutually respectful social contract behavior to the adults. That's not working. We're living in a brave new world, and we've got a lot to suss out. So I think there's a lot to be resolved on this entire Twitter digital social media issue.
Yeah, the new CEO started as an engineer. It seems as though he might have a little bit to learn about politics, which, Sarah, brings us to this. The only thing that really seems to unite the progressive left and the populist right, AOC and Josh Hawley, is breaking up big tech. Does this comment make Twitter now the primary and first available target?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, look, they obviously have both been outspoken. Both factions of, both parties have been outspoken in their distaste for big tech. So we'll see if there's any kind of bipartisan legislation that'll be able to be pushed forward on this issue. I kind of doubt it, only because we haven't really seen bipartisan action on a lot of issues, namely, China, an issue that is obviously uniting all members of Congress. They still can't get a bill passed. So we'll see if there's any actual real action or if they're just going to talk about it.
Fair enough. Colby, how worried how worried should the media be of Twitter becoming the censor of the town square, so to speak?
Well, I don't think it's a huge concern. I think, obviously, if there's one central place with which we all communicate, it gives that place power to be an arbiter. But I think their rules and conditions that you agree to are pretty clear. You can't use hate speak, you can't threaten physical violence, and you can't, incite violence, and you can't sort of libel or disparage an individual. And if you do that, then you're breaking the rules, and you get suspended or you get kicked off. Again, what's interesting about this, I think, is that you see on the right, you see for kind of an upside down thing where the progressives are basically saying, let's let the free market resolve itself. And the right is basically taking, let's get sort of big government and the state to manage this better, which is kind of an upside down world that we're in and something that we didn't expect to see. Again, I think that we're still in the third inning of digital
That's
communications, right. And it's going to take us a minute to try to figure out exactly how this all shakes out.
Sarah, as Capitol Hill looks at this, is it one of these problems that sort of Congress would love not to solve, sort of like immigration? It's something to always complain about and argue about, but you don't actually have to have a solution for it?
Well, they're definitely not going to say that out loud, and they're probably not going to say that quietly either. But I think, like I said, it's hard to see any sort of bipartisan legislation being passed in reality. That being said, this is something that they will be able to be angry about, to hold hearings about. Those obviously always make the news, and that's something that people love to tweet about and use the platform to sort of drum up their base and their support. So I think you're probably right that we're not going to see any real action on this.
What do you make, and we'll put back up the Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nancy Mace tweets. All started, of course, with Ilhan Omar and Lauren Boebert. There's sort of this Mean Girls thing going on of who can be meaner and snarkier on Twitter. How much of it's an act, and how much of it is this true venom that you're seeing both within the Republican caucus and to a certain extent within the Democratic caucus?
Yeah, no, I do think a lot of that is coming from a real place, unfortunately. Just a few moments ago, Ilhan Omar left the House floor, and she shared a voicemail that was left her by Congresswoman Boebert that basically spewed venom. She essentially said that Boebert, again, this is the Republican Congresswoman from Colorado, said that Omar could, expect something to happen to her soon. It sort of seemed a little bit like a veiled threat, definitely not appropriate in any sort of public circumstance. So it's coming from a place of vitriol, and to an extent, of course, is being amplified because they know that their supporters appreciate those kinds of tweets.
Yeah, and they can fundraise more. Final thoughts, Colby, because for some reason I think this voicemail is going to end up on Mediaite.
Well, if it's newsworthy and people want to see it and they want to figure out what they've missed, then I think it will be. To your earlier question, I think, Nancy Mace was relatively unknown a month ago, and she's been all over the news for a variety of reasons in the last week, not least of which is the Twitter battle that she got with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I think that answers the question you asked just earlier. I think there's real animus, to Sarah's point, but I also feel like, dividing one another and getting in these spats, and it gets attention.
Yeah, no, it
And
definitely
now
gets attention.
We're talking about Nancy Mace.
Well, it's interesting. We're all talking about Nancy Mace in the Twitter spat. We're not talking about the fact that she was on a congressional delegation to Taiwan that the Chinese really hated, and you have huge national security implications. But we all go for the Twitter fodder. Hey, Colby, Sarah, it was always good to see both of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right.
I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I've been accused of.
You remember him? That was Jussie Smollett 2 years ago. All right, he's on trial now. We'll tell you what he's saying, what his defense is saying as they search for the real victim in the case. The prosecution began its case today in the trial of actor Jussie Smollett here in Chicago. Family and friends of the former Empire star arrived with him to court. He's accused, as you might remember, of faking a hate crime in January of 2019 that sparked, and had it been true, it should have sparked national outrage. Smollett claimed he was attacked by two men who yelled racist and homophobic slurs at him and a pro-Trump slogan while he was getting food at a Subway late one night. He then claimed they tried to tie a noose around his neck and poured a chemical on him. You can see body camera footage there of him with the police. There was an intense police investigation, sympathy from scores of politicians and celebrities. Chicago police officers found no surveillance video showing any attack. Police then questioned two Nigerian brothers, including one who had worked on Empire, and authorities alleged Smollett paid them $3,500 to carry out a hoax attack. They were seen on this surveillance video buying supplies prior to the incident. Smollett was indicted on charges that he lied to police. But then Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx dropped the original charges against Smollett. There was a special prosecutor brought in, and now we have the case that we have now. Today, a former police detective testified that the Chicago police detectives who interviewed Smollett and investigated the case clocked some 3,000 hours on what they believed was a horrible hate crime before the Nigerian brothers eventually told them how the attack was orchestrated. And there's potentially some damning evidence, as prosecutors say they have video showing Smollett and the siblings doing a dry run a day before the alleged attack. But the defense says Smollett was a real victim of a real crime and that police rushed to judgment. With that, we bring in Philip Turner, criminal defense attorney. Philip, good to see you. I feel like Jussie Smollett looking for the real victim is like OJ searching for the real killer.
You're absolutely right. From what I can see, the defense on this case is ridiculous, quite frankly. The evidence of the prosecution is extremely strong. Plus, Dan Webb is the prosecutor. Now, I served under Dan as an assistant United States attorney. Dan is a fabulous person, and he's a fabulous lawyer. And he's very experienced, both in terms of direct examination and a lot of cross-examination, because he's been a defense lawyer. If Smollett climbs up on the stand, it's going to be bloody murder. I mean, he will destroy him completely.
Can you defend this case in front of a jury without putting him on the stand?
I think it would be wise to do so. I think it would be a mistake to put him on, but I think you're sort of compelled to. Look how this case is going to unfold. I mean, what Smollett alleged, and then you're going to have these two black fellas climb on the stand, and no one's going to claim that they're Trump supporters who did this. It's on its face, it's kind of preposterous when you see these two individuals and they get up there and say this.
Yeah.
That this plan
so
and all the evidence.
Why try to defend this case if it's truly unwinnable? In their defense is that the Nigerian brothers were some kind of career criminals and somehow had something going on with Smollett and on and on. Why not just plead this out? Have Smollett say, "Look, you know, I had some kind of break with reality, and I was depressed and dumb, and on and on." Let the PR people spin that and move on. He's facing real prison time here.
Right. Well, it's sometimes defendants put themselves in a box, and people have egos, and some people, especially I think actors, have big egos, and so they just can't bring themselves to admit that they've done something wrong or done something stupid. And this is certainly one of those situations. You know, I don't know if he's going to claim these people were secret undercover Trump supporters or something like that, but this is not going to fly. I mean,
you really wish of all the trials that this one had cameras in the courtroom, because it would be great.
Oh, absolutely.
It would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Real quick, what does this say about Kim Foxx that she dismissed these charges and now all of a sudden a special prosecutor comes in, refiles them, and as you point out, has a pretty strong case?
Something's very, very wrong in that office. Yeah. And also the manner in which they dismissed the charges, where they snuck into court to do it. Yeah. It's outrageous. It is just outrageous. And it needs to be thoroughly investigated and made public. And hopefully the public will do what they should do. I mean, it's just amazing that a prosecutor would do this.
And not the only thing that's outrageous that comes out of Kim Foxx's office. Hey, Philip, I'm sorry, we got to bounce, but it was great seeing you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you, too.
Yeah.
See you soon.
CNN finally steps in and suspends one of the network's most prominent anchors. It's not quite a breakup, more like taking a break from Chris Cuomo. Breaking in the past couple of hours, CNN has suspended Chris Cuomo indefinitely. There were growing calls for him to be fired or step down. Monday, we got evidence from the New York Attorney General showing his role in helping his brother, now former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. His role in helping his brother was a lot bigger than previously known or disclosed. Chris Cuomo said he was not in the business of opposition research. The evidence now shows Chris used his media sources to seek information on women who had accused his brother of sexual harassment. In one instance, Chris allegedly forwarded documents about one of the former governor's accusers, Charlotte Bennett, from her college days. Bennett responded on Twitter today saying, "Yesterday we learned just how far Chris Cuomo was willing to go to discredit, silence, and smear women like me who came forward to report Governor Cuomo's sexual misconduct. His behavior is reprehensible and unprofessional and inexcusable. CNN must act now. Anything short of firing Chris Cuomo reflects a network lacking both morals and backbone." Perhaps that wasn't in question before, but there you go. After not addressing the issue on the show for quite some time, the younger Cuomo finally spoke up on his Sirius XM show today. Unger Sargon, opinion editor for Newsweek, joins us now. Batya, let's get after it. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. All right, you think about it. Andrew Cuomo was a jerk. His brother is a sanctimonious jerk. But at some point, if your brother's in trouble, what is wrong with asking your friends in the media what's coming next for him?
You know, I think the real question here is, why does a journalist have so much power? The story here is, yes, it's a story of deep journalistic abdication of ethics, right? A star journalist using his power, his star clout to defend his brother, a celebrity politician.
Wait, hold on. But do we know that he used his clout to defend his brother? We know that he used his experience to advise his brother, but do we yet have that he somehow leveraged people to be nicer to his brother?
We know that he reached out to his sources and connections in the media to find out at what stage certain stories were. So he reached out to high-positioned editors to find out, quote unquote, where the story was at. And, one surmises that he also gave his opinion about whether these stories should be shared or not. That is a deep, yes, abdication of journalistic ethics. Don't you think, Leland?
Yeah, well, no, the issue of when you cross the line to become an advocate publicly versus privately advising, that's certainly something different. I just think to myself, if my sister called me and needed help, I'd be the first one to answer that bell. There's a larger question, though, here. What's worse in that Chris Cuomo called sources, called friends in different publications and asked what's coming next, or that CNN lionized and heroized Andrew Cuomo while his policies and was killing thousands of people in nursing homes and then covering it up that CNN barely covered?
Or even worse than that, the fact that the rest of the media only went after Andrew Cuomo, not for killing 20,000 vulnerable seniors, but because he had sexually harassed a couple of women who worked for him. Now, bear in mind, that was before we knew about the groping allegation, which is a serious allegation. But the media turned on Cuomo not after he murdered 20,000 seniors, but after he had sexually harassed a number of women who worked for him. I'm sorry, but where are our ethics? Where are our priorities?
Well, that's a good question, which I'll let you answer the question. Where is CNN's priorities on this? Or was it that the Cuomo brothers were no longer useful to them.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly the point. You know, you can tell when the media smells blood. And what that means is that they will only turn on somebody when their power is already waning, which gets back to my original point, which is that journalists and journalism and elite journalists are part of the elites right now. And people who are in the elites protect other elites. They protect power. Journalists used to be the people on the outside defending the little guy against the powerful. And now they are the powerful. And now they are defending their own power as well as the power of their, selected familial politicians.
I only got about 30 or 45 seconds, but conceivably the great equalizer is social media, is Twitter, is Facebook, that gives a voice to people. But that seems not to be working in cases like this. Why not?
Leland, 92% of tweets come from 10% of the people on Twitter, right? Who are those 10%? It's people like us. It's journalists who are supposed to be on Twitter all day, right? It is not a democratic thing. It's not an egalitarian thing, Twitter, giving a voice to the people. It's just more elites using their power to silence the elites that are losing power.
Batya, we'll leave it there. We appreciate you being with us, especially on a Hanukkah night. Happy Hanukkah to you and yours. We'll see you soon.
Happy Hanukkah, Leland. See you soon.
Thanks. Always a great perspective. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.